Hi everybody, today I want to talk about telling your child that they have autism. Is that something you should do or shouldn't do? Stay tuned and we'll discuss. So I'm asked a lot by families who have a child with autism if they should tell their child that they have autism or not. And then I also just work with families that already have a really strong opinion on that and they either do or they don't. So today I just wanted to talk about talking to your child about if they have autism and if it's something you should or shouldn't do. So I guess the first thing I want to say is it's your child, you know what's best for your child. So of course it's up to you. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. The second thing is I think it really depends on your child's, ability and their theory of mind. Some children with autism just don't have the ability to really understand what autism is, and so it doesn't matter. But then some children with autism do have theory of mind and are aware. And so these are the children that we're talking about. So like, for example, my son Bradley has theory of mind. He understands that he's not the center of the universe, kind of. But I mean, he understands that there's different people with different thoughts, different ideas, different feelings. He understands that. So those are the kids I get asked about a lot. Just in my own experience, when Bradley was very young and was diagnosed with autism and tuberous sclerosis, the neurological condition that he has, we were always really open about the autism. We were open about it with friends, with families, with strangers. We just felt like we just needed to be open about that. And I don't know if some of that comes from me being adopted, because I'm adopted and people always ask me, when did you find out you were adopted? And it's like, I never found out I was adopted. Like, I always knew. I didn't get sat down when I was 13 and told I was adopted. My parents started talking about it at a very early age, so I was always just really comfortable with it and really open, and it's just like a part of me. And so we decided with Brad that we were going to do the same thing, just be really open about it. And, remember, Brad's 29, so when he was formally diagnosed, that was 25 years ago. But even before that, we would just tell people, well, he has a diagnosis of, he has autistic-like tendencies. And again, it was really before there was a lot of autism awareness, so we kind of had to do a lot of explaining. But we were always just very open. And I remember having to tell other moms that their child couldn't catch it. When Bradley was very young, I would try to get him with other kids that were, typically developing, invite their mom and the other child over. Like, I did have some moms ask me, like, this isn't contagious, right? And it's like, no, it's not contagious. So for us, being open and honest about Brad's autism has been like a really good positive thing. I mean, Bradley knows he has autism. He will tell people he has autism. He will advocate for himself. I've actually heard him say to people, I'm sorry, I have autism and it takes me longer to figure things out. Could you say that slower? So like, he will, just tell people. And like, if he ever were in a situation where he would encounter like a police officer or something, I really tried to teach him to tell the police officer, right away, I have autism, and just self-identify quickly, because police officers have to make really fast decisions about if somebody's impaired or under the influence. And of course, we've got a bunch of kids with autism who don't like to make eye contact and look down. And that's one of the things police officers are looking for when they're trying to assess somebody, if they're, inebriated or not, is eye contact. So, but for us, we've always been really open about it, and just people have understood. I feel like it's been an opportunity for us to educate people and just to share kind of what autism is and kind of put a face and a name with it, which is Brad. I have run into families before that we are not even allowed to say the A word. Like, we cannot say autism around their child. They don't share it with their family, and that's their decision. I think some families are from different cultures, and I think that, there's different, maybe stigmas and just different social things attached to a diagnosis like autism. So I understand that and respect their wishes. I've also come in contact with a family who never told their child that he had autism and would talk to him about going off to college and just all the things that he was going to do. And then when it came time to go off to college, he couldn't go off to college. He hadn't graduated high school. And then they were left with an 18-year-old, like, really really bewildered and like, why am I not going off to college? Why am I not going to be an astronaut? And so like in that case, I think it backfired. I think he knew enough and was self-aware enough that he should have been told. I wouldn't want anybody to ever think that I didn't tell them I was adopted because I was ashamed of it or I thought it was a secret. So I wonder if, if my parents had not told me and we kind of made it a secret, that I would have felt ashamed about it. So I don't feel like Bradley feels ashamed of having autism. I think he actually identifies with the Asperger's group, and he'll tell people he's an Aspie, though he definitely has a diagnosis of autism. But he knows he has it, he identifies with it. Our whole family kind of embraces it. So I do think that it's worked out well for our family. I think, every family has to take into consideration, if it's right for their family or not. And even if your child doesn't have the theory of mind and wouldn't understand that they have autism, I think the family should consider whether they want to be open and honest about it. And for me, like, I would encourage people to be open and honest about it. If you have a child that has some unusual behaviors, I think it's fine to, to tell people like, oh, this is my son, this is my daughter, she has autism and she likes to do this, or like, oh, it's just autism, nothing to be afraid of, just kind of make, I don't know, like, I don't want to say jokes about it, but just sometimes if you see people are just kind of looking and feeling, anxious, just to say, oh, it's just her autism flaring. I've heard people do that before, and it does kind of like, okay, break the ice. And sometimes when Bradley and I, when he was younger and we'd be in a crowded place and he was having, just like a little bit of an unusual behavior, I would talk to him, and then I think, I'd say, hey, Brad, can you not doing that? We're in a public place. Let's, use quieter hands. And then I think people would also be like, okay, like they could hear me talking to him and be like, okay, she's talking about quiet hands. Obviously there's something going on that I should be a little bit like forgiving of, or just like a little bit more understanding. It's not just a child who's like a total brat. So with Brad, he knew he went to a lot of doctor appointments, and his brother Ryan used to tell people, he used to say, this is my brother Brad. He's artistic. And then I remember one time Ryan had a little friend, and I'll remember this little boy's name and everything. He was probably in the first or second grade, and he was this young child who was like 6 or 7, was very gently trying to ask me if there was something wrong with Brad. He knew at that early age that Brad was different. And so he did kind of ask me, I think he might have even said like, is there something, wrong with him? But he didn't mean to say it like that. I could see he was definitely searching for a more polite way to ask. And so I did say, yes, Bradley has autism, and so he's a little slower to learn things, and sometimes he makes some big awkward movements, but it's okay. And I just explained it to this 6 or 7 year old, and like they were fine with it, like, okay, like, no biggie. And so we've kind of lived our life like that. So when I think about like telling Brad, like, I don't ever remember telling him like, you have autism. It was always just like, we were just very open about it. Like, you have to go to, you have therapy, you have this, well, this is harder for you because you have autism. Just always, telling him about it. And there have been times where he's come back and asked me about it. I remember like one time, I don't know, he was probably like maybe 14 or so, but he asked me, he said, did I catch autism? And I explained like, nope, you had autism from before you were born. The minute you were Bradley, you had autism. It was a part of you. Because I think he was, thinking sometime that maybe how did he catch it, or did he do something wrong to get it, or, hearing things, did he get it from a shot, things like that. And I just wanted to explain it like, nope, you've always been like this. It's okay. It's just who you are. Just like I've always been adopted, and it's okay. It's just, who I am, part of my story. So I would really, I think, encourage people to be open with it. I think there's so much understanding now and acceptance that I don't think there's anything to hide or be ashamed of. I mean, I can not say, yeah, have there been times Bradley has done stuff out in public that I was like, oh my gosh, that I was embarrassed? Yeah, absolutely. But I've never been ashamed. That's what I'm hoping for the newer generation. And I definitely feel like the new generation embraces it, talks about it, shares it. I could see if people didn't want to share it with their coworkers, but I think if they did, they'd be surprised how much support they got. But again, everybody has to make that decision for themselves. So if you have anything else you'd like to share about this topic, or just your insights or your experiences, like, please share it below. Are you open with your child's autism, with your child and with everybody else? And if so, how has it worked out for you? I'd love to hear that and talk more about it. And again, I come in contact with a lot of newly diagnosed families, and they ask me for this kind of advice. So I'd love to hear, other people's stories, because maybe there's other things that I need to consider. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you are enjoying the videos. If you would subscribe to this, I'd really appreciate it. Share the videos with somebody else that you know that has a child with autism, and ask them to subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much, and I hope that you are living your best life with the side of autism.